Somebody's joined us. Hobo, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. Right, well, let's get underway and see if anybody else joins us for the live show. So we'll just get started in a few seconds. Indeed. Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, Sikhs across Indianapolis have cast their votes in the latest round of the Khalistan referendum. And the turnout in terms of the size of the local Sikh population was actually pretty healthy, as always. And as a few people in our audience have been quite critical of one of its high-profile organisers, Gurpreet Singh Pannoon, we'll do a quick rundown of just who he is, but also a short analysis of the referendum campaign itself as a whole. And then it wasn't just Indianapolis that saw action over the weekend. India's Independence Day, the 15th of August, brought a coordinated wave of protests right across the world, not just the Indian state, but across the diaspora, from a petition handed in at Downing Street here in London to consulates in Italy, to demonstrations in Canada and indeed inside Punjab itself. It was a weekend of activism and action, and not least the Khalistan football team, their massive success in the Midlands on Saturday. It was, of course. I do watch my show yesterday for the reports on that football match as well. Indeed, all this and a little bit more on today's show, slightly shorter than usual today, still catching up a little bit from the weekend away following the Khalistan football team. But anyway, today is all about the 15th of August. Indeed, that date that has been very much the date of the moment over the last sort of week or two. So let's start with, of course, Indianapolis. And what a great weekend, apparently it all was. Over that weekend, Sikhs for Justice did indeed hold that latest round of its ongoing Khalistan referendum at the Richard G. Lugard Plaza in downtown Indianapolis. And as I've said many times before, it is worth being clear about what this actually is. It is, yes, admittedly, it is a non-binding, but it is a symbolic vote with no legal force anywhere in the world, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't change any borders. It doesn't create in itself any new country. But what it does do, of course, is measure the organised diaspora sentiment, round after round, city after city. And, of course, the campaign has been running long enough now that we can actually compare one round to the next just to get an idea of just how many people overall are voting in this referendum. Now, this is the eighth, I do believe, the eighth staging of the referendum since that very first vote back in London in October 2021, so it's 5 years ago. And the numbers from earlier rounds give a useful context for judging Indianapolis. So, for example, Brampton back in 2022 saw apparently around 110,000 people turn out. Calgary saw around 55,000 in 2024. Ottawa, over 53,000 last November. Even Seattle, a city with a comparatively small Sikh population, even that small city saw over 27,000 votes cast back in March. I have had a sort of a silent nod or a very quiet nod from somebody in the know connected with it, who said they believe over 2 million people actually in reality have voted. I don't know if that number is true, but it does sound an awful lot. But that number literally in the millions of those who have actually voted. So ultimately, it doesn't matter what you think of the politics, whether you're from India or here in the UK or you guys in North America. None of these are fringe numbers. This is not a fringe movement, as India really goes to great pains to point out. So, and actually, in terms of numbers turning out, of course, it's always very difficult to get the truth of these things. And for example, how many actually turned out in Indianapolis? And there was a huge range of disparate reports, and certainly researching it myself across the whole internet, trying to get a definitive number was absolutely, I have to say, it was a challenge. And the numbers, I'll talk about some of the numbers, but it does seem maybe one of the most reliable ones. And was actually reported by the Sikh Press Association's own reporting. And they actually linked up to a named US source. It was, in fact, the Indianapolis Star, the local newspaper. So it's quite likely that they, of anybody, did actually probably know the numbers that turned out. Anyway, the Indianapolis Star, they did actually report an estimated 13,000 plus ballots cast. That was in a piece that was written by a lady called Alexandria Burris in the Indianapolis Star. and then it was updated yesterday, I do believe, just with some updated information. But that is a real, it's a real number from a real local paper. It's not, it's not a number that's come out from Sikhs of Justice. It's not a number come out from any other news outlet, and I'll talk about those other news outlets in a moment. But it does appear to be a pretty solid, well-researched number. And it is worth noting, again, although it's a smaller turnout than several of the earlier rounds, Indianapolis itself has nothing like the Sikh population of, for example, Brampton or Calgary. There's much, much larger Sikh diaspora populations. So even if it is a lower absolute number, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's any decline in momentum in that referendum campaign. Quite the opposite, in fact. And more likely, it just simply reflects just a smaller local community turning out at a broadly similar rate. So clearly, this referendum is being attended in massive numbers, still proportional to the diaspora populations. And as I referred a bit earlier about the other numbers that have been bandied around. Some Pakistani outlets. Here's an interesting one. Where are we? Yes, this is Geo News in Pakistan. This did actually make me chuckle. And for all we know, they may be right. Geo News, and along with some other Pakistani outlets, Ari News, Dunya, Daily Times, and even some Kashmir outlets, Kashmir Media Service, apparently, they're all running with a different story. They're claiming a turnout of 110,000. And which is interesting. Again, not corroborated, and really, it's only Sikhs for Justice who can actually issue the genuine numbers. And as yet, they still haven't issued anything absolutely formal and confirmed, so we don't know. So it's a little bit of guesswork, other than the 13,000 said by the local outlet. Interestingly, though, just as a side issue, these Pakistani, was it Kashmir outlet? They claim that organisers, and I think Gurpatan Singh Pannoon himself apparently has announced at the Indianapolis referendum at the day that he's proposed that Shimla is the proposed capital of Khalistan. Now, that's interesting. I've gone looking actually for more corroboration of that story. And it's not reported really anywhere else. It's hard to actually corroborate and confirm. If any of you guys were actually there in Indianapolis, and if Gurpatan did stand up and speak and say that Shimla should be the capital of Khalistan, do let me know, because it's obviously a pretty significant thing to claim. Of course, many people have said it should be Lahore, Chandigarh. I mean, we've had all sorts of different discussions about what indeed the the capital should be. As you say, Hobo, Shimla. Who knows? I mean, it's just outside Chandigarh. It's up there in the foothills of the Himalayas. I've never been. It doesn't look like a beautiful place. Why not? But anyway, nice to see you online, Khalsa Desh Punjab. Nice of you to join us. So ultimately, let me know your thoughts. Where do you think the capital of Khalistan should be? There are all sorts of different schools of thought on that one. So it'd be interesting to get your opinions on that. But ultimately, back to that number, this 110,000 that a lot of these Pakistan outlets were reporting as the turnout for Indianapolis, I think it's probably not true. And that's the exact figure that was reported back in Brampton at the referendum in Brampton in 2022, 4 years ago. So it makes that number a little bit suspicious. Maybe they sort of copy and pasted it. Who knows? Anyway, it doesn't really matter ultimately. But it's not surprising that other outlets are just fishing around for any sort of news that they can. Hobo says it should be Delhi. Actually, there's a good claim. I think now that is a school of thought that I can certainly align with, and I think there's certainly a very good, very strong argument to say that Delhi should be the capital. I think Khalistan should stretch down. Of course, the Sikh Empire did indeed stretch down that far into present-day India, so there is a very strong argument. Why shouldn't it be Delhi? Absolutely not. I mean, there's enough arguments to say yes. So anyway, so back to this, and so let me show you. I did get some. We talked about car rallies in last week's shows. There's been a fantastic a few days before the actual Indianapolis rally. There was this car rally. Let me show you some pictures from this. Somebody live streamed this, and I did find this just the other day. This is one of the car rallies leading up to Indianapolis, and it was miles and miles long, apparently. And this, the live stream, I've just taken a few minutes so you can just have a look at it as I'm talking. But the live stream went on for several hours. It was, well done to the people who live streamed this. So well done to the local Khalistani campaigners. You did a sterling job on this. Interesting though. And for anyone turning out for this whole campaign, it is just for a little background as well. It's worth explaining briefly how these votes actually work on the ground, since obviously it's not run like an ordinary referendum or ordinary election campaign. Now, and just to reiterate some of the points, because of course a lot of criticism. I'll come to the criticism in a moment, but the referendum has been designed very deliberately, and it's been overseen by what Sikhs for Justice call the Punjab Referendum Commission. And this is a panel that is made up of independent experts on direct democracy. And their stated job is to supervise the question put to voters, check the voter eligibility, to manage the registration process, and of course then count the ballots. And the whole aim of doing that is to make sure that this whole exercise meets what the organisers say are recognised international standards for this kind of symbolic vote. In other words, it really undermines any criticism coming from India or elsewhere that it's meaningless. It's a nonsense campaign. It doesn't mean anything. Well, actually, Sikhs for Justice and the Khalistan campaign can turn around and say, actually, yeah, you might say that. It might not be legally binding, but it was certainly run under democratically recognised international standards. In other words, this was no fix. There was no there was no artificial voting in this. This was overseen by independent experts. Yes, ultimately, there is no independent electoral body anywhere in the world that recognises or will certify the results of this referendum. And the commission is Sikhs for Justice's own creation, and it is answerable to Sikhs for Justice, which obviously is, it does lose its sort of independence to some degree. But ultimately, the whole purpose of that is essentially just to say, look, we are running as close to legally recognised protocols as possible to try and at least undermine any criticism, certainly coming from India. But anyway, talking about India, it was very interesting that, of course, India was not silent, as it tends to be, as it tends not to be on these matters. In the Indian Gaudiya media and the Indian pet news outlets were certainly quite keen to try and suppress the success that was being reported around the world of the latest iteration of the referendum. And for example, there's this IANS Live, whoever they are. It's just another Gaudiya sort of media outlet. India West. It frames this whole campaign, the Khalistan campaign, including actually this convoy that I've just shown you. Oh, sorry, I was still showing you the convoy. There you go. So here, this is this IANS Live, this sort of news outlet. That again, clearly just another outlet for India. They've framed this whole Khalistan campaign, including that car convoy that I've just shown you. That was along Interstate 465. A few days ago, flying all those Khalistan flags, label them, as always, as extremists. Extremists, really? So all these tens of thousands that have turned up in Indianapolis, they're all extremists, apparently. And apparently they're all exploiting Western freedoms. Okay. We've been here before. No doubt there were terrorists as well. So there were 13,000 terrorists along with their families and children, all smiling and laughing on that wonderful occasion in Indianapolis on Sunday. They were all terrorists and extremists, apparently. And what were the Indianapolis police doing? Were they there running around arresting them all for being extremists and terrorists? No, they weren't. They were there just supervising, smiling, shaking hands with many of the campaigners there. It was a very friendly, happy event. So it's really interesting, of course, when you see these Gaudiya nonsense propaganda pieces that try to undermine what's happening, the success story of this referendum campaign, because they realize they really hate it. They hate the success, the publicity, the public relations exercise that has really ramped up over this campaign. And of course, the whole Khalistan campaign as a whole globally, that really, as I often say, they are on the back foot. So they're having to push out these regular propaganda pieces. And it wasn't just IANS Live. Here's one of our old favorites, Khalsa Vox. Yes, indeed. Khalsa Vox. The Khalistan referendum is a sham, apparently. And Indianapolis just proved it again. Again, this I often dip into Khalsa Vox. Regular viewers will recognize Khalsa Vox. It pretends itself. It packages itself up as a pro-Sikh. You know, we speak for the Sikh community. We are the Sikh voice. But then, of course, it just fills its pages with anti-Sikh and anti-Khalistan propaganda on a regular basis. So again, it's judged by its articles. And then, of course, this was the latest one that was written today. Actually, it was issued this morning about the referendum. Again, just trying to fight back against this positive publicity that the referendum has actually generated, because ultimately it's exactly the kind of narrative this shows that really is just repetitive. And it's just tedious, I have to say, to see it over and over again. And I think, fortunately, it is losing its power. And it is a well-worn pattern that comes ultimately sourced from the Ministry of External Affairs in India. And of course, the Hindutva IT cells and that whole machinery, that hugely, massively resourced machinery, the anti-Khalistan machinery, that is just, it pours in news articles, pre-written, pre-packaged anti-Khalistan news articles into outlets like this. And ultimately, as I say, it's the India's Ministry of External Affairs. I mean, for example, at Brampton, when they held their referendum back in 2022, the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson at the time called it a, quote, farcical exercise held by extremists and radical elements, and said it was deeply objectionable that a friendly country would allow it to happen at all. So, of course, it was Canada was being deeply objectionable for allowing a piece of democratic protest and democratic referendum. I mean, it speaks for itself. And ultimately, be surprised if Delhi's reaction to Indianapolis is any different from this. It hasn't actually, as yet, that I can find, issued any sort of formal public statement on the situation, but it'll come, no doubt. But ultimately, so the Godi media, as always, really onto this. And the man of the moment, Gurpreet Singh Pannu, and because we keep covering this campaign every time it sort of comes around, it is worth pausing just because I know many of you are quite critical of Gurpreet Singh Pannu. I've defended him on many occasions, and I think he is worth defending for the work that he has done. Yes, he is very sensationalist. His rhetoric is very bombastic. It's very provocative. But as I have said, he does serve a purpose. But the man himself, he has really become a sort of a lightning rod. He really attracts a lot of attention, which in itself is part of why he does what he does, because he wants to attract attention. It's not actually to him individually, it's to what he's standing for. That is what people don't realize, is that when he's standing up, making all these statements, these videos, etc., it's not about him. People think it's about him. It's not. All he's successfully doing is drawing attention to the campaign itself. And Sikhs for Justice, and just a quick sort of backstory, just to give you a little bit of background about Sikhs for Justice itself. It was founded in 2007. And it was originally focused on, actually, as normally, and even ourselves, believing the same principles. It was founded originally for seeking justice for the 1984 genocide in November 1984. So it was established on very sound principles. But then in 2012, it sort of pivoted into this strategy, a different strategy of filing lawsuits against Indian politicians and other public figures under American law, and in fact, specifically as America's Alien Tort Statute. And that actually is an 18th century law that lets US courts hear certain human rights cases, regardless of where that alleged abuse took place. In other words, Gurpreet Singh Pannu used that old American law to then allow in US courts these abuse cases that happen in India to be heard publicly in US courts. And of course, that was a very clever tactic to highlight not just the US court, but of course to the US public of what India really was and what it was guilty of and what it was still doing, the transnational oppression, etc. So ultimately, the general counsel and public face of Sikhs for Justice, this guy, Gurpreet Singh Pannu, he himself, he's a dual US and Canadian citizen. He's in his early 50s. He was actually born in Punjab, unsurprisingly, in Natu Chak village in Punjab. And he studied law at Punjab University. Then he moved to America, and then he worked on Wall Street till 2014. India designated him a terrorist in 2020, and actually that was renewed last year. It was, yes, I reported on that. Every 5 years, his sort of terrorist designation renewal comes up in front of the courts, and every 5 years it's just rubber stamped. Yes, he's still a terrorist, apparently. I mean, please, Anyway, so India still sees him as a terrorist, and they rubber stamp every 5 years his designation officially as a terrorist, primarily because of his Khalistan advocacy. And he's wanted in India in nearly 24 cases. Charges, of course, he unsurprisingly completely rejects. And he says his activism is entirely peaceful, which it is. I mean, I defy anybody to show me evidence of anything that he has ever said, certainly in recent years, that provokes or incites violence, that breaks laws, etc. And this is what his critics, and this is what India really fall into his trap beautifully every single time. And it does make me laugh. I'm sure it makes Gurpreet laugh. Is that he just knows how far to push it without breaking the law. This guy's a lawyer, don't forget. So when India says he's a terrorist, he incites violence, of course he isn't, and of course he doesn't, because he knows the law. He knows just how far he can push it. He knows exactly the sort of language he can use without breaking the law. An American law, of course. So, which is why he's a free man and he's free to campaign. And India hate this, yet they over and over again fall into his trap of his provocative statements and try and claim that he says things that he never did say, which again, in turn, is a clever methodology, which then undermines the credibility of India, because people say, he didn't say that. You're jumping to conclusions. He did not say that. He actually said something different. But you've just said that's what he implied, but he didn't imply that. It's a very clever psychological tactic, and people just never give him the credit for this. I do, because I see what he's doing, and it does work, which is why, again, I defend him regularly. TC, nice to see you online. And I've got a bone to pick with you, TC, because, of course, over the weekend I was at football, and it turns out, according to your comment after yesterday's show, that you were there too. You saw me with my camera, and you did not come and say hello and introduce yourself. So, TC, I'm absolutely horrified you did not do that after everything. So, anyway, consider yourself told off. Anyway, back to this. So, 2023, of course, American prosecutors alleged something considerably more serious than just simple campaigning. An Indian national named Nikhil Gupta, this story that we've talked a lot about, I'm sure you guys know very well, had, of course, been recruited to assassinate Gurpratap Singh Pannu on US soil and working, as according to the Department of Justice, at the direction of an Indian intelligence officer, Vikas Yadav. Now, for a long time, of course, that remained an allegation, a very serious one, denied by Indian officials all the way through, unsurprisingly. But it was essentially just an allegation that went through the American courts. But that did change, of course, on the 14th of February this year, when Nikhil Gupta pled guilty in a US court to murder for hire, conspiracy to commit murder for hire, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. And as part of that plea deal, he then admitted transferring $15,000 online to India to someone he believed was a hitman, who was actually, as it turned out, a DEA informant. So federal sentencing guidelines, of course, it could have meant that this guy went to prison for at least 20 to 24 years. And his plea agreement did actually require at least 2 decades. And he will be sentenced officially on the 29th of May. So there's still quite some time before we'll hear that. And of course, Vikas Yadav, the Indian intelligence officer that prosecutors say is behind this whole operation. In fact, actually, it's not just Vikas Yadav. There is no doubt that this goes all the way up the chain to ministers and indeed Amit Shah himself and, of course, Narendra Modi. It is no doubt. India does officially still deny it. But ultimately, Pannu himself has previously acknowledged putting up so-called kill posters online, kill Modi politics. This goes back to what I was saying earlier. So he admits this, and he says it is a tactic that has drawn condemnation. Indeed, many in the diaspora have condemned him and criticized for this as being needlessly inflammatory, despite the whole campaign. I mean, you can make up your own minds. Ultimately, it's but as I've often said, this is just what Gurpratap Singh Pannu does. This is his methodology. Interestingly, though, I had on Saturday when I met various really interesting individuals, and lovely of you guys for turning up and introducing yourselves. But of course, I did speak to some of the team from the Sikh Press Agency and Sikh Federation UK. And they did say it's one of their concerns, because I said, look, how in terms of the Sikh Federation's operations in terms of pushing the Khalistan movement forward, I said, how do you feel about Sikhs for Justice, and how does that fit in with this other sort of more sedate but more legalistic campaign being fronted by the Sikh Federation International? And the comments back were great, but it's just going on and on and on. It's about time it was wrapped up and brought to a head. Where's it going? Where's it? You can't just keep rolling out referendum year after year. What's the point? It's not proving anything other than, well, lots of people are turning out to vote. But you've got to start focusing it into something. And I think this is absolutely right. And I do echo that, actually, because people have assumed, and myself included, we have assumed that Gurpratap Singh Pannu was then, his next move was to push somehow for a referendum in Punjab. That is, of course, the next obvious strategic push. I don't know how on earth you could achieve that, but ultimately, really, that is theoretically where it should be going. But what Sikhs for Justice really need to think about is, come on, we've been at it for 5 years now. Where's this going? We can't just keep going around the world having more and more of these referenda. What is the plan? Where's the end goal in here? What is the end game of this? We need to know, because the longer you keep this going, the less power, the less impact it's having. Because yes, I'll keep reporting it, but ultimately, well, we had another referendum today, we had another referendum again, but where's this going? So I think that was a very, very valid point. Another sort of sidebar on this as well. Very interesting talking to Jess Singh of the Sikh Federation as well. I asked him, and you guys, the regular viewers, the Baku, remember the BIG in Baku, the Baku Initiative Group, I think it was called. The Sikh Federation went to Baku earlier this year, I think it was January or February this year, to talk to a lot of local ministers and form alliances, a lot of very powerful people there in attendance, pushing again the Khalistan movement, forging these alliances with international players, of course, with the Azerbaijan government. And the Azerbaijan government, very happy indeed to form these alliances to represent the Sikh community, because, of course, Azerbaijan isn't necessarily aligned with the Five Eyes nations as such. It is very much a different player. It operates in a very, very different geopolitical sphere. So Azerbaijan doesn't care too much about aligning with the Five Eyes, not like the UK, for example. We will always, well, with rare exceptions, always align with US policy, Australian policy, European policy, etc. But Azerbaijan does its own thing. It has its own interests to look after. So it is more willing to form alliances like with the Khalistan campaign. Of course, the British government, it'll be a cold day in hell, I've no doubt, before the British government actually get off their backsides and think about the Khalistan movement as a positive thing for whatever reasons that we've talked about at length. So it's interesting. Anyway, going back to what I was saying. So Jas Singh was telling me that, I said, how did it go in Azerbaijan? He said it was really interesting that as much as the Azerbaijan government were really keen to cement ties between them and the Khalistan movement, there were Indian operatives, Indian diplomats milling all around, flooding the meetings, trying to really integrate, impose themselves on all the meetings, essentially trying to break up these alliances, trying to create divisions in these alliances. In other words, India realized what the Sikh Federation was up to, forging these powerful alliances with Azerbaijan, and they were sending whole teams of people at very senior levels, apparently very senior levels, ultimately very senior diplomats, to impose themselves on these ministerial meetings to try and disrupt and stop these alliances being formed. That in itself, as I said to Jess myself, that actually is a very powerful compliment to the success of the Khalistan movement. If India is having now to send senior diplomats, senior ministers, senior people all the way to Baku to try and interject, to try and stop these meetings happening, that means those meetings are working, they are effective, and they're achieving great things for the Khalistan movement. And India is getting desperate because they're realizing, as I often say, they're losing this multilateral war, because this war is being fought between India and the Khalistan movement on so many different fronts. Of course, we've got the referendum campaign, but then, of course, we've got this legalistic, the United Nations campaign, forging alliances with international governments like Azerbaijan, that campaign. And India is fighting this war on all fronts, as indeed the Khalistan campaign. So it is a huge, huge campaign going right across the world, literally. And India is, well, I say, is waking up, has well and truly woken up to the power and effectiveness of this Khalistan campaign. And as Jas Singh said, they are making great progress. They are forging really important connections, links, supporters, and alliances around the world, including all these people within the United Nations itself, with governments like Azerbaijan. And that is forming a very, very powerful nucleus that is going to essentially take the whole movement forward over the next sort of few years. So again, it was a very interesting conversation that I had with Jas about that. Let's just dip into some of you guys. TC, he knows he knows what he's doing. Need more Sikhs in politics? Absolutely, we do. Gurmaj Singh, welcome. Khalsa of Vaheguru, victory of Vaheguru. Long live Khalistan. Indeed, absolutely. That's Sri Akal to you. Avatar Dylan's joined us as well. Hello, nice to see you. Khalistan 10, India 0. Indeed, absolutely. It was Khalistan 6. Kuman Sucker Gallagher, that's the Irish side, on Saturday 0. So it was a 6-0 victory. But as I say, there's no gloating over that victory. It was a fantastic day. Do watch my report from yesterday if you haven't watched it already. It was a fantastic day out. It was great that both sides turned out a really, really friendly match, a great result, obviously, all round for the Irish as well, just being there in the first place. But it was a lovely day. The crowd was fantastic. A really great bunch of people. I'm going off on a side tangent here now, so I'll come back to this story in a moment. But whilst I'm talking about it, so many of you guys came up and introduced yourselves. It was really nice to talk to so many of you. And of course, many of you who don't drop into the comments. And I did say, look, comment, don't be afraid. And of course, I know if you don't want to comment, of course, you don't have to comment. It's entirely up to you. But it was really nice that so many of you did come and introduce yourselves and introduce your families, which is lovely. And it was lovely to meet you guys as well. And the support, the warm feelings I felt for you guys is really, really nice. And I did meet some very important people as well. Forged some very good alliances. So again, it was a very good networking event amongst the Sikh community as well. So well done, and thank you for the lovely warm welcome and reception I got from the guys in Willenhall and Wolverhampton from you local guys. Much appreciated. Anyway, I've whittled on on the tangent there. We must get back to this. What else can I say about this? Okay, let's. I think we'll leave this story now. I think we've talked enough about Gilbertine Symphony. Let's. So the 15th of August. Indeed, it was Avatar. It was a friendly match. It was a fantastic. I mean, the atmosphere on the pitch was great. There was only one clash of heads. The goalie hit one of our attackers, and it was a clash of heads. But the sport, it was lots of handshakes and lots of well dones all round. Did I say it was the atmosphere was just so nice. It was a really, really good game and just a really good crowd as well. So anyway, yes, 15th of August, this date that has been ringing around the show for the last week or two, because of course it is that awful date, the Black Day, as many Sikhs call it, the Black Day of Indian independence. But it did, unsurprisingly and gloriously, I have to say, become a whole day of coordinated protests by Sikhs and Khalistan campaigners around the world, not just in Indianapolis, but literally all around the diaspora. And it was great. So as I said, I'll just dip into a few sort of reports, but there's loads more information out there. I'm sure you guys have probably seen it across social media. I'll just pick up one or two sort of ones that I think worth talking about. Here in the UK, interestingly, the Sikh Press Association, they reported that a petition was handed to 10 Downing Street. This is the home of our Prime Minister, basically our government, the centre of our government, 10 Downing Street. So this petition was handed over, and the petition demanded official UK recognition of the Khalistan referendum campaign as a Sikh movement, and one that the Sikh Press Agency, or Association rather, describes as dozens of actions carried out by Sikh groups against the Indian state that day. Now, their own reporting also puts protesters outside the BBC studios. Apparently, they were there objecting to what they call, interestingly, the amplification of Hindu nationalist propaganda alongside demonstrations at Indian consulate buildings globally. So again, I mean, I think basically wherever there were Sikhs, there was protests. So well done, guys, all around the diaspora. And WHO Pans has popped in. Nice to see you. Very good coverage and presentation. I hope they're all doing well. Continue on the path. Detractors also can give opinions. No disrespect this space. The international Sikh. Yes, indeed, absolutely. We are a broad church. If you excuse the expression, basically we welcome anybody with conflicting opinions, and we have had a few who've dipped in to our comments, and it's always nice to see these guys. Do keep it respectful, do keep it polite, but it's always nice to have that debate. And I do love actually seeing a few critical comments in our comments, either after the show or even indeed live, because it's always nice to have that sort of open debate. We are not just a simple propaganda show. Obviously we have our own narrative, which we believe is the truth. But ultimately, we are always open to be persuaded otherwise. But it's up to you guys who disagree with us to persuade us otherwise. Anyway. So back to this petition. So interestingly, we have a system here in the UK of petitions, and I'm sure everywhere around the diaspora you've got a sort of equivalent systems. But handing a physical petition is actually quite old-fashioned, but it is not without meaning, because it does mean in practice. It's easy to confuse it with what we have. We have a formal e-petition system, an electronic system that exists online, and they're two very different things. Petitions started on the official government website, parliament.petitions website, follows a very clear protocol. If you reach 10,000 signatures, then the government is then obliged to issue a written response. But if you reach 100,000 signatures, then the Cross-Party Petitions Committee, as it's called, then schedules a full parliamentary debate. They are obliged in Parliament to debate the subject of your petition. In reality, it's actually a tick boxing exercise, because we've had some petitions that have literally reached millions of signatures. I personally started a petition that reached, was it 1.5 or 2 million? I forget now, nearly 2 million signatures, which is about Tony Blair, who was going to be knighted. And I thought that was absolutely outrageous, bearing in mind this man, how much blood that man had on his hands and how much damage that man had done to so many things. And I went, boy, if you're a supporter of Blair, sorry, but I'm not. And I'm unapologetically, in fact, I'm just apologise. I'm not. I am unapologetically a huge critic of Tony Blair. I think he's one of the most evil mentors have stood on this earth. That's a personal opinion. Your opinions may vary. But anyway, I did start a petition on that, and I received millions of signatures on it. And it did go to, as a result, it went to a parliamentary debate. And like all these debates, it was basically rejected. And I can't think of one petition actually in that e-petition system that has actually successfully changed government policy, but that's just a system. In other words, it's a bit of a thing that the government do to give the people the belief that they have the ability to change things, when in reality, the government controls everything. So, but ultimately, but that is our e-petition system. This that was handed in to Parliament was in fact a physical petition. Handwritten signatures. This is the old way of doing things. And you used to get a lot of these, 30, 40 years ago, and they've disappeared now with the internet. But certainly in the old days, this is what we used to do. We used to sign a piece of paper or a thing. You sign your name, your address, and your signature on a petition. And then it would physically, you would literally get boxes handed to 10 Downing Street. And there'd be this sort of ceremony where the door would be opened, they would take in the boxes of signatures and say, thank you very much. And in reality, likewise, nothing ever happened about it. But anyway, but this, of course, this did happen. And it was a petition that was physically walked up to the door of number 10. And it does actually, ironically, weirdly now, it does carry more weight, more symbolic weight than an e-petition, because of the effort and of course, the publicity that goes behind it. Because, of course, recognizable, photographable actions. Likewise, here you go. An e-petition, you can't photograph it other than take a screenshot. Here, you've got actual photographs at the door of number 10 now circulating around mainstream media. So that is why things like this, actually, ironically, although they're old-fashioned, as a PR exercise, has been fantastic to see. So, as I say, ultimately, nobody in the government is obliged to respond or even to debate it, or even actually formally log it in any way. And I dare say, sadly, it'll go in the bin file out the back of number 10, sadly. But that doesn't matter. What matters is these photographs, because it's these photographs that actually are the message. It doesn't matter what the government, we know the British government are never going to move, much as we try hard to change them. But it's photographs like this that actually spread the message and spread the good word and the important word. So ultimately, it's efforts like this that do actually really make at least some difference. But ultimately, it is worth understanding the wider backdrop that this petition lands in, because it isn't happening in a diplomatic vacuum. The Sikh Federation UK, and again, I've been talking about them, their organisation has actually become quite high profile now, particularly amongst the Khalistan campaign. The Sikh Federation UK has actually been on Delhi's radar for several years now. I didn't realise this actually until I researched this story. It was back in 2018. India's then Minister of State for Home Affairs raised the Sikh Federation directly with his British counterparts. And he actually said that Sikh Federation was anti-India, pro-Khalistan, and pointed out that it had banned Indian High Commission officials from entering certain gurdwaras, and actually then pushed the UK to consider prescribing the Sikh Federation outright as a terrorist organisation. I mean, ultimately, the Sikh Federation of all, it is, you think how legalistic the Sikh Federation is. It is talking to the United Nations. It is collating groups of lawyers and powerful people. It is forging alliances with international governments. And yet India tried in just a few years ago to get it prescribed here in the UK as a terrorist organisation. I mean, that again tells you all you need to know about India and its philosophy and its lack of democratic credentials. So ultimately, as a result, of course, Britain's response was then to say, look, okay, we will keep the federation under check. We'll monitor it, but stressing it had to follow its own legal democratic process for banning any organisation. In other words, sorry, but here in the UK, we are a democracy. We follow the rule of law. And unsurprisingly, it did not prescribe the group, and it hasn't since. And of course, why would it? There is no reason to. But the tension hasn't, of course, gone away either, because during his visit to the UK last summer, Narendra Modi, when he came here last year, pointedly urged Britain to hold what he called Khalistani elements accountable for misusing democratic freedoms. I mean, please. This is what Narendra Modi hates. Narendra Modi hates the fact, as indeed the whole of Hindutva do, hate the fact that here in the West, we allow democratic campaigning and protesting. That is what you normally can do in a democracy that clearly you can't do in India, certainly not without facing pellet guns and live ammunition. And he said, he actually accused the Khalistan campaign of misusing democratic freedoms. Please, as I say. And Narendra Modi specifically cited, interestingly, the demonstration outside the Indian High Commission in London, shortly after which Avtar Singh Kandar was no doubt murdered by Modi's government. Of course, just a few days after Bhai Najjar was murdered in Brampton in British Columbia. So again, this relationship between Britain and the India is slightly fractious, but ultimately, for some bizarre reason, the British government does keep getting on its knee to India, even though it still is bound by the normal democratic rule of law. And so in other words, it still cannot prescribe groups like the Sikh Federation as a bunch of terrorists. Of course they're not. So because it knows if it tried to do that, even under pressure from India, that there would be a whole army of lawyers who would just say, oh, no, that's not happening. That's not to say Gurpreet Singh. That's another story we'll talk about on another show. Remember the story of Gurpreet Singh, who has now been basically debanked, de-jobbed, everything. He cannot function as a British citizen because the Treasury, under pressure, no doubt from India indirectly through the British government, has basically closed him down. He's closed his bank accounts, won't let him function as a normal British citizen with no trial, no charges, nothing, just on the word of the Treasury. So the British government still does bow down to Indian pressure when it can get away with it. And there are many of you guys in our British Sikh community who have suffered under similar ridiculous, and I can think of a few which I won't mention because they are confidential, but there are individuals that I've spoken to who have been demonized. And TC was it? Yeah, democracy. Exactly. There are individuals who've been demonized by the British government purely under the pressure from India. It's appalling. But anyway, I'm sort of digressing. Interestingly, though, the history here in the UK does include real security incidents, not just rhetoric, because back in March 2023, after that Indian tricolour was pulled down from the High Commission during that protest in London, which obviously was then followed a few months later with the murder of Avtar Singh Kandar, the then Foreign Secretary, a guy called James Cleverly of the Conservative Party at the time, James Cleverly, our British Foreign Secretary, issued a formal condemnation calling violence towards the High Commission of India as unacceptable and confirmed the UK was working directly with the Metropolitan Police to tighten security there. So, in other words, yeah, okay, there is the rule of law. We've got to keep law and order. But ultimately, it's very clear the British government was more than happy to at least show lip service to India, saying, yeah, we agree. We won't question why that individual might have done it, but we'll certainly act on your behalf to protect your embassy, etc., etc. So anyway, in other words, the British government are too close hand in hand to the Indian government. Now, it's also worth remembering, this is where it starts getting a bit weird and interesting, because the BBC has actually faced very much the opposite accusation on this sort of same idea, because back in October 2022, and if you remember, I did report was it a few days ago, there'd been a protest outside the BBC headquarters in London, in Portland Place, by the Sikh community, particularly about its reporting. And it's sort of, there's the two-tier reporting. And it was specifically about Duleep Singh and calling him an Indian prince. Of course, he wasn't an Indian prince. He was a prince of the Sikh empire, as was. So there was that protest by Sikhs outside the BBC. Well, it turns out, I didn't realise this, back in just 3 or 4 years ago, British Hindu groups then organised a massive protest outside the BBC in London again, under the banner that BBC's anti-Hindu and anti-India bias must end. And they accused the corporation of Hinduphobia and Indiaphobia. So, unfortunately, the BBC, and well, whatever your thoughts on the BBC, but it's interesting. The BBC finds itself, not for the first time, being accused of political bias by completely opposite sides of the same argument. And ironically, it's the same about politics. It gets accused by the right of being acting for the left, and by the left of acting for the right. Whichever way it turns, it doesn't seem to win. So ultimately, the poor BBC has sort of fallen a bit in the middle. But it's interesting then that the Hindus here in the UK, likewise, as in you guys in the States, are fighting this. The Hindu or the Hindutva organizations pushing this Hindu phobia agenda. In other words, trying to silence even mainstream outlets against criticizing the Hindu community. You can't criticize the Hindu community, you'll get accused of Hindu phobia by Hindutva. So anyway, so back to the 15th of August and all these protests. So ultimately, yes, indeed, there have been protests all around the place. And indeed, in Italy, apparently, there was this, well done to you guys. And I've dipped a few times into you guys in Italy. If any of you watching in Italy, let me know, because I know that there is quite a Sikh diaspora in Italy. It's quite a large one, actually. In Milan, apparently Kashmir, of all outlets, it was Kashmir Media Service, reported that there was a rally outside the Indian consulate on the 15th. And I think this actually is reflected all around the world, outside Indian consulates all around, is that, yeah, there have been these groups who have campaigned outside the consulates. But here you can see a picture of just a small crowd in Milan. So well done to you guys. And to say Italy is an interesting one. And I should maybe spend more time on the Sikh community in Italy, because apparently it's the 6th largest Sikh population in Europe, anywhere in Europe outside the UK. It's the 6th largest in the world outside India. And it is the 2nd largest in Europe. Here in the UK, we've got the largest, but the 2nd largest is in Italy, interestingly. And they're concentrated apparently around Pontigna in Lazio and Novellara in Emilia-Romagna. And that apparently is where Sikh farm workers have become genuinely indispensable to Italy's dairy industry. Apparently, they are the people really keeping the Parmesan and mozzarella production industry alive, because younger Italians are moving away. It's the Sikhs who are keeping that whole dairy industry, that cheese industry, alive. So it's fascinating, actually, that what you guys in Italy have been up to. Anyway, but of course, you've been out there on the street, so well done in Italy. Punjab itself, of course, unsurprisingly, and well done to you guys in Punjab, because this does take real, genuine courage. It's all very well out here in the diaspora, campaigning and protesting outside an embassy or a consulate, whatever. I mean, as long as you're keeping it peaceful, you can shout as loud as you want. But you do that in Punjab, as I say, it requires a different level of courage to this. Because apparently there's been all sorts of, there's been protests and a strike and a boycott called in places like Ambala, Chandigarh, around the whole weekend. And in fact, again, it was Kashmir Media's service that reported this, because again, you're not going to get it out to the Indian media. I mean, you laugh over it, but ultimately, you know how hard it is to get the truth out of the Punjab. I have to go through social media to get most of these stories, because the Godi media, if they ever report anything, of course, it's with such a biased partisan slant, you can't really get the truth. So I do have to, I mean, there are still a very small number of news outlets that somehow get through the cracks in Kashmir. And again, bless those guys, because again, it takes courage, particularly in Kashmir, to report on these things. So yeah, even the Kashmiris, the media outlets, have actually managed to produce some news of what's been happening in Chandigarh and around that sort of area. But apparently, Indian police used, in fact, I've got some video, I'll show you that in a moment, actually. Indian police have been using water cannon, tear gas on demonstrators. They claim that protesters threw stones at police. But ultimately, that came indirectly from the Godi media as well. So it's very hard to know the truth. But ultimately, and I do know that water cannon was used, because I've got some video, which I'll show you in a second. That's interesting. Thank you, Hobo. It's a radical Islamic mouthpiece. Nothing there is true. Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, take it as read. But what I would say, as I say, there is, let me just play this, this video so you can actually see. This apparently is, there you go. This is in Punjab. It doesn't say where specifically. I suspect it is in Chandigarh, around Chandigarh area. So It's happening, and it has happened. So well done to those guys. It's not a small crowd either, interestingly. Again, as I say, it does take a different level of courage to do this in Punjab these days, knowing that what the Indian police, not just physically, are capable of doing, but if they catch you, they'll come after you and your families, and you will literally get disappeared, even today, which is outrageous. Anyway, so well done to those guys in Punjab. And then, of course, over in the diaspora, in Canada, thank you to one of you guys. You are online. Yes, indeed, you are. Thank you for sending me these. I'm just going to show you a few selection of these as well, just to wrap up the news today. Because, of course, in Canada, where, of course, there's a huge diaspora population, massive. Mohali, thank you. That's where that was, next to Chandigarh. Thanks for that, WHO Panza. Anyway, so yes, of course, a few photos which have been sent in by one of our correspondents. You know who you are. Thank you for these. As you can see, this was in Canada, and again, a good turnout. Lots of the same old. Great to see. I mean, again, this is what's so wonderfully provocative. It's deliberately provocative. We have Modi in a coffin, and again, it's these sorts of images that actually are so powerful, because it really, really upsets the Indians. They hate this. They try and jump on this, saying, "Oh, it's incitement to murder." No, it's not. It really isn't. It's very symbolic, and the fact that it is upsetting India proves that the point is being driven home. It's great to see these things. So well done to you guys who were out there. There you can see loads of them. Great turnout, clearly. All very, you can just tell from the smiling faces, very happy event, but of course about a very serious situation. And getting the flags out there, getting people to see and hear what it was all about, and actually, of course, to see and hear the truth. That's what these things are about. So as I often say with these things, always use these opportunities to talk to those around you. In fact, I did actually talk to somebody at the football match on Saturday night about this very subject, particularly about the car rallies. Is that some people were intimidated, particularly in Indianapolis recently. You get some people on social media, even not even right wingers, just people on social media saying, well, I was a bit scared seeing all these cars with all these Indians. What was that about? Because they don't know. And so it's really, really important in all these situations that you go to huge efforts to educate the local community, the white people around you who might be intimidated or afraid. Explain to them what it's about with a smile on your face, friendly. Buy them a bottle of water or something, and introduce yourself. So I hope you don't mind, but this is what we're campaigning about. And this is why it really matters to us, because that simple barrier breaking is massive in terms of educating people and spreading the good word. Because then people naturally, because it's such a worthy cause, people think, oh yeah, I understand that. I support you. So that's why it's really important to do stuff like that. So anyway, that's just a little sort of an added suggestion. So anyway, right, we must move on because we've only got a few minutes to. I thought it was going to be a shorter show than usual today, but you got me in wittering mode. So I've been wittering and ranting about things. It always extends the show longer than expected. Thank you, WHO Panza. The water spray. This is Mohali next to Chandigarh. That's the water cannons. Yes, I assume that is what it is. So. Indeed, yeah. Punjab, as I said, well done to those guys, particularly those guys protesting in Punjab does take a certain amount of courage. Didn't they put chili powder in the water? That's a rumor I've not heard, and it is quite wicked actually, if that is true. So yes, the police were worried when they saw Singhs coming with a coffin to the gates of the ambassador's residence. I'm sure there was some people inside getting a little bit nervous. I've absolutely no doubt. So well done to you guys for that. As I say, keep it peaceful, keep it happy. Don't make it too intimidating. At the end of the day, it is it's all about trying to build bridges, not necessarily upset too many people. So, but anyway, but ultimately, well done to you guys for that great turnout. Fantastic to see. Right, let's move on to our comments because we are quickly running out of time. And there's lots of comments I do want to get through. Yes, Baljit Kaur, thank you. Lovely comment. This, God bless you and thank you for your support. Well, absolutely. And the same to you, Baljit. Thank you for that. And bless you and thank you for your support as well. Much appreciated. And, just a nice, a small amount of love from Love Zelda. Thank you. And same back to you. Now, Punjab, good heavens, Punjab. This was a big one. I don't have time to go through it in detail, but let me quickly summarize the key points in your very lengthy comment. Thank you for this. How am I handling the heat? It's still shorts, I'm afraid. It's still it's actually dropped, I have to say, today. But gosh, it's still so hot in the studio. So yes, we're still, if you see the satellite photos of the United Kingdom that have just been issued today, we're brown. We've just gone brown, the whole country. What used to be our green and pleasant land is now a brown, barren desert because we haven't had rain for months. It's terrible, actually. It is actually quite terrible. So anyway, Oh, sorry. Yes, there we go. Yes, so Punjab. Yes, interesting. This was you talk about you're really into seers, those people who can sort of see the future, and well, a few apocalyptic predictions there, which let's not dwell on. We're a happy show here. Interestingly, though, thank you for this correction. This was about my awful Punjabi pronunciation of Mai Pago, which I probably completely got totally wrong again. Thank you, Panjab, anyway, for correcting my pronunciation of that. But what you did do, and very usefully, we don't have time to sort of read it out or talk about it, but ultimately, you did actually give a much clearer explanation of the heroism of this original Sikh lady back in the Sikh Empire days. In the very early Sikh Empire days. So thank you for those. And those of you who want to know, obviously, a bit more of a detail of what actually probably happened as opposed to what I sort of recounted from my own research, is have a read of Panjab's comments. So thank you for all that, Panjab. DTST is still very much with us. And of course, you guys have had a few sort of tennis matches, verbal or written tennis matches backwards and forwards with DTST. And he's been very much present in our comments column. Thank you, DTST, for your continued efforts. And this one, it was in response to something that I responded to. And unfortunately, I don't have time to get bogged down in the detail, because clearly you've really gone to huge efforts to explain a lot of things. All I would say in response to a lot of these comments, DTST, is thank you. But what really matters, it's not so much the fine details of the history, because what really matters is where we are today and where we will be tomorrow. That's really what it's all about. Yes, we will always respect and make sure we understand our heritage, but ultimately that is less relevant than what happens tomorrow. And that is really where we're going with this. So thank you for your explanations, but ultimately, so what, I think is a very respectful response to that. Haji Rosha, oh, thank you for this nice comment. A very interesting and informative program. This made me chuckle. I particularly like your British accent and want to adopt it. I'm afraid the Americans might make fun of it. I need your take on it. Well, there's a whole punchline and probably a whole show of jokes about the British accent versus the American accent and our different words, which clearly I'm not going to go down. But ultimately, the British accent, it's the Queen's, or now the King's English. And there is nothing wrong with the British accent, I have to say. Americans apparently love it, or certainly American ladies apparently really do like the British accent, so I've heard. I'm not personally had experience with that. And ultimately, I'm losing my voice now because I've been talking for so long. Let me just have a quick sip. Ultimately, if you speak in clear Queen's English, then actually anybody who speaks English has the best chance of understanding it. American English, and again, I can really upset my American friends here by having a go at American pronunciations and the butchering of the English language by the Americans, but that's a whole other issue. And all I'll get then is a whole, yes, exactly. You say potato, we say potato, or whatever. And so no doubt all our American audience will be on here having a go at me. So I'm not even going to provoke that one. But what I would say, Haji, is if you do speak with a British accent, you will be understood by hopefully just about anybody who speaks English. So it is no bad thing. And actually, a few people have said in the past that quite often they use this show to teach their young to speak English. Unfortunately, I do speak a bit quickly sometimes because the clock's counting down, so I have to. But when I try to speak slowly and as clearly as possible, so at least those of you who have English as the second language can still follow the show. And of course, the subtitles can also translate as well better. Amakara, thank you for this. This was actually a very important comment, interesting one, because it does reflect a theme that we do talk quite often about. The truth in the Punjab and the whole agenda of Hindutva, they have this divide and conquer agenda, basically learned from the British. They are doing their absolute level best to divide our communities, the Hindus with the Sikhs with the Muslims, and that whole round of different communities, Christians, Jains, Sikhs, Muslims, whatever. Create divisions, because if you divide them, then the minorities, it's easier then to control and remove the minorities. When they're all friends, as in Amakara's comments, when they're all friends, it's much harder to firstly control them, and secondly, to remove the minority, to purify India into a Hindu Rashtra, ultimately, which is what they're after. So as you rightly pointed out, Amakara, many people on social media have actually said, no, this is not right. This is not fair. This propaganda that Hindutva is pushing out on a regular basis, that there's violence between Sikhs and Hindus, isn't actually true. In the large majority of cases, particularly these days, is that many Hindus, and they've said, I've seen it myself on social media, many Hindus say, I've got Sikh friends. I don't want to fight my Sikh friends, and vice versa. Many Sikhs have got Hindus as friends. And ultimately, the whole message of Khalistan, which is what Hindutva try to leverage, they're saying, oh, they want their Sikh homeland. So there is a division. They don't want Hindus there. Well, that's totally wrong. Of course they do. Hindus will just be equally as welcome into Khalistan as any other religion. They will be as welcome as Sikhs. Any Hindu is welcome. Any Dalit of any caste is welcome. Probably Brahmins, probably less so, I have to say. But ultimately, that's me personally speaking. But ultimately, yes, anybody will be welcomed. And then, of course, there's the whole sinister side about the propaganda about the murders, particularly in the 80s and 90s. And I've seen this myself. Many Hindus and Hindutvas on social media saying, oh, they murdered 35,000 Hindus killed in Punjab, murdered by Sikh terrorists. Really? As people have said, and in your comment on Makara, well, show us the evidence. And many people have said this. Well, show us the evidence. Show us the police reports. Show us autopsy reports. Show us any evidence that supports these claims that tens of thousands of Hindus were murdered, because actually nobody seems to have been able to produce this. And I think there was one, I forget now, one of you guys will probably remember this. There was was it one of the singers? Maybe it was Sidhu Moosewala, or somebody said, anybody who shows me the evidence, I will do something, whatever. But a very high profile figure actually dared Hindutva prove it then. And they never did. So, but it's all about divide and conquer. You're absolutely right, Amakara. It's terrible, this. And they are trying to divide the peaceful people of Punjab. And if they didn't do that, and they held a referendum, I've no doubt that many Hindus would actually support the whole concept of Khalistan as well, because then they escape the caste system. Anyway, DTST, again, I won't go into that one. Oh, gosh, we're at the hour mark. I need to wrap things up. Daily Jet Daily, thank you. Good. I don't know, good what? Hopefully the show was good. But anyway, good comment is what I would say to you. WHO Panzer, here you are on here as well. True journalism, keep going, great news. Thank you, WHO Panzer. Much appreciated. And one message to you, WHO Panzer, about your email, about making contact. I've been so busy after the football on Saturday. I'm still catching up. I will respond to emails, and let me think what I've got to say. I've got to be careful how I say this. There is a small group of people who may be interested in getting together offline, passing around email addresses. I will form the hub to pass on email addresses. Obviously not going to do it in the public domain. I'm not going to do it on the show. But if you guys who want to be part of a small sort of group of regular viewers, if you email me, and one of our viewers certainly is trying to sort of organize as well. And what the message is basically, I will liaise with you offline via the email and try and put everybody in touch to form a group of people to discuss the things that we discuss. So ultimately, and I don't have the email address for several people that you did ask for, but leave that with me, and so I'll work out a strategy how to somehow get everybody that we want to talk to send me their email address. Anyway, so that's just on a side issue. Thank you, Dan. Oh yes, you're back again. Oh yes, this is a comment about. So we don't have time to go about this. But basically, we are who we are. It's all about labels, but ultimately, oh good heavens. I'm just going to skip these because these are too long. We're going to wrap the show. Sorry, WHO Panzer. But thank you for your comments anyway. TC, well done. Oh, yes, indeed. Well done to all the cause. That piece I did on the brave, heroic women in history, Sikh women who formed such an important backbone of the community for so many years. WHO Panzer, again, you're very busy on this show. Thank you for that. No BS here. Absolutely not. We are a show that only brings you, hopefully, the truth. TC is back again. Liars do need to be brought to task. Charlie Kala, Khalistan Zindabad, Hardal Singh. Oh, should we have an interview with Guptan Singh? I did reach out actually some time ago and he never got back to me. Who knows? We'll try. Oh, and then lots of Punjabi comments. Hello, Hobo. Oh, you're online as well, Hobo. Nice to see you. Thank you to Satsri Akal to you, sir. And where's my button? Nirmal Singh, another regular. Hi from Australia. Thank you for your comment. Nice to see you again. Major Mafia, loads of Khalistan Zindabads, loads of Punjabis, which sadly don't translate across here, which I'll skip those. There's another little bit of a spat. Major Mafia came back, but I think one of your comments, oh no, it wasn't. But I think one of your comments was in English recently, so thank you for your continued Punjabi contributions. And 6334, Vaheguruji Ka Khalsa, Shri Vaheguruji Ka Fateh, and Safety Muffins with the ice cream cones as usual. Gurman Greywell with a regular daily Satsri account saying to you, sir, thank you for that. And Gurbaj Singh signs us off. Oh, no, it doesn't. It just has a Vaheguruji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguruji Ka Fateh, Khalistan Zindabad. Good job from Murgiv's Long Rinku. And the final word of the show as we rush to the final overtime end whistle of today's show goes to Mughis Log Rinku, Punjab's solution. There is only one solution. It is, of course, Khalistan. Khalistan's in the band. Indeed. Thanks to you guys. Thanks for all your continued support. Thank you for all your comments live. Nice to see you guys joining me on the show. Much appreciated. It's always good to see you guys when I do go live. And don't forget, tomorrow, Wednesday, will be, God willing, touch wood, live at 5 as usual. So do make sure, if you can make it, do join me tomorrow at 5 p.m. UK time. It's always great to see you guys online and be able to have a bit of a conversation. It's even better than the comments, which are always after the thing. Don't forget, of course, yes, once this show is uploaded and whatever YouTube does with it, I do like to see the comments. If you've got comments after the show, once it's uploaded, do put some comments beneath that, so I can obviously have a good chat about your thoughts on here as well. But that is it for another day. Thanks so much for you guys. Thanks for everything. Thanks for all your continued loyalty. And as I say, all being well, I will see you guys live at 5 tomorrow. Thanks very much indeed. And I'll have a great night. Catch you tomorrow.